Welcome to the Mango Effect podcast, where every week we talk about the path to living a limitless life and having the freedom to do it your way. No topics are off limits. We get into the practical, the hypothetical, and the downright juicy stuff. I'm Mindy Rosser, your host and lifestyle cheerleader, and I'm here today to talk about why boring is good. Like, Mindy, what? Why boring is good. So have you ever felt like things were just plain old boring? Sometimes when life and work, relationships, everything's kind of going well, like it's humming along, we forget that our intention has always been to get to this point. When we were roller coastering before, we claimed that we wanted stability, we wanted predictability, we really wanted life to get to a place where it was kind of plug and play. Then when we get there, we forget, like, wait, it's kind of boring. Oh, I kind of miss the ups and downs. Oh, we may not necessarily consciously think about these things, but subconsciously we're almost like stirring up trouble just to get a little bit of excitement. So boring can be one of the best things for us. It can be very healthy, but we must embrace these moments rather than trying to stir up trouble just to excite ourselves again, which can often bring a lot of negative things our way. And this is something that's been top of mind. I actually wrote down this idea several weeks ago, and I've just been pondering it because something about boring is good. I'm like, why is boring so good? Why is it a beautiful thing when things are stable, when things are kind of just going along? And for me, my business is something that's really been top of mind. And I have actually, if you've listened to some of the prior episodes right before this one, you may have heard me talk about making some changes to my business and making my work incredibly boring I actually eliminated the big quarterly launches out of the picture of my business, at least for this time. I may change my mind down the road and I may do some quarterly launches again, but knowing where I am in this season of my business and my life and my family, everything is just so integrated. I knew that for me, really thinking hard about what was best for my business was to get it to that predictable level. And it's kind of funny because it's not exciting. When you see like the same amount of revenue coming in, it's like, okay, I'm writing profiles, I'm working with my one-on-one clients, I'm doing some coaching sessions, I have a membership, all of this stuff is really boring because it's kind of plug and play and you're doing the same thing over and over again. And so having those quarterly launches, I think can, for some people, be healthy because, okay, that's how they're getting revenue and that's how their business is structured. That's how they do best. They actually enjoy the process. And for me, it was not that way. Every single time it came time for this quarterly launch, I would dread it. And I thought it would get easier over time, but by doing it, I did it 8-9 times. I was realizing this is not the path for me. Every single time I do this, the same thing happens. And I've tried all the tactics. I've done all the things. Like I have made it plug and play. I'm not reinventing the wheel every time. But why am I still feeling incredible anxiety around this? I don't like the ups and downs. I don't like seeing the spikes in revenue per se. I don't like spending a ton in Facebook ads, Meta ads to generate that revenue. That part always felt risky and I felt very, very unsettled. And so for me, I had to make a decision and say, okay, I'm not going to prioritize that right now. I'm going to take my business back to where it was really boring, where I worked with my one-on-ones. I did what I was supposed to do. I do my speaking. I do my other marketing activities, but my big bulk of revenue is coming from stuff that is recurring. A lot of it's referral based. And because I have built a name in my space, like a big enough name, it's not massive, but it's good enough to generate, a healthy amount of revenue that also supports my lifestyle that I can do month over month. And so that shift in itself was massive. And coming to my business now, it's amazing because I start my weeks. I look at my weeks, I'm like, okay, there are still a few things from the big quarterly launches phase that I'm still working through because I made commitments and promises to people. And so, okay, of course I have to kind of deliver on those, but shifting gears into kind of, I feel like I'm kind of downshifting. Like, okay, I'm going to downshift, but actually the benefit of that is that my business profitability is skyrocketing. And to me, that is really exciting because I'm a solopreneur. For me, it's not about building this massive empire. I don't want a bunch of employees. I really like the solopreneur feel. I like the freelancing. I like doing partnerships. I like being brought on somebody's team as like a fill-in marketing person. That kind of stuff is really fun because it keeps life exciting. It keeps my work exciting, but also boring enough where it's not like these big spikes in revenue where I'm trying to scale my business to the moon. I'm doing all this hard work and visualization. I mean, if you really think about it, to do those big quarterly launches or, annual launches like some people do in the digital entrepreneur space, for those of you who are not familiar, people think it's just like, oh, it's just automation. You're just putting people through funnels that you've already built. But to maintain that, you have to do a ton of marketing. Like you are working just as hard as you did before, if not harder, for unpredictable revenue for many people. Now, some people, it just takes off like gangbusters and, that's them. That's great. For me, it was not that way. So I had to make a call. I had to say, okay, I've been doing this for 18 months, but is it really serving me? And should I just go back to making my business a little bit more boring and just going with it? And I have really felt that profound shift and am embracing the boring in my business and the predictability. And I can hone my craft. I think that's also the beauty of this too. When you get to the point where you are out of the roller coaster ride and you are to a place where you can actually have it a little more boring or stable. I like the word stability better. Then you can actually hone your craft. You can become better at what you do. You can go deeper instead of wider. You're not on this trajectory where it's so unpredictable. So just embrace it. If you're in a place in your business, in your career where it just feels like it's a little bit boring, think about it for a moment. Do you really need to shake things up? Sometimes there is a time when you look at it and you're like, this is not serving me and it is boring and I do need to shake things up. Okay, in that moment, make a decision. But for those of you who are just shaking things up to do it, because you need some excitement, that may not be the best option. So just kind of weigh it, really think through it. Like as we're talking today, just really ponder, okay, let me think about how this applies to my business. I wonder. Another way that I have seen boring come into play has been living in different places. So many of you may not know, I have lived a lot of places. Like it's funny. If you looked at my credit report, when you pull out your credit report, you actually see all of the addresses that you've had. Oh, mine is, I think it's like 20, 25 places at least that is on that sheet of addresses. And sometimes you get asked those as security questions when you are checking your credit. And I'm like, I don't know. What was that address again? I have to pull it up because I've lived in so many spots. So for me, stability in where I'm living is a big deal because choosing to intentionally stay where I am versus move somewhere else because, it's either better to be a homeowner versus renting, or it's better to rent versus owning a home, or it's cheaper to live in a different neighborhood, or maybe it's more expensive, but you get benefits living in a different neighborhood, or maybe we should leave the island of Oahu and move to a different island. All of this stuff comes into play in my household. We have conversations about this a lot because for me and also my partner, like neither of us have really stayed in one place for a long period of time. So this is something new to me and I'm trying to get comfortable. Like, okay, yeah, what we pay to live where we live is manageable. It's not anything crazy, but it's manageable. But it does have that boring feel. We're not like fixing up a house to sell it. We're not house hacking. We're not doing all this real estate stuff that we got into for a short period of time. We're not trying to make massive changes with where we live because being stable and also bringing our kids up in the same area is really important to us right now. And we may change our mind down the road, but for now, that stability in where you live in your immediate environment can be very powerful. But you also have to know when to make a change. Like obviously when I was living in Indiana before we moved here to the North Shore of Oahu, so I was living in Indiana for a few years before we moved here, about 3.5 years ago. It was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I definitely don't want to be here. So if you are living in a situation or a place where it's not the right place, yes, you do need to make a change. But sometimes after you make that change, when you get to a new spot, it's really exciting, right? Like when we first moved to Hawaii, it's like, okay, the honeymoon phase. Like, wow, we have palm trees here. We got mango trees. We got beautiful foliage. Like you can go hiking in the most amazing spots. You've got mountains. You've got ocean. You've got just wide open space. Island life is incredible. And then it wears off. Like all of a sudden it becomes just another place. Like when we first moved to the North Shore, it was pretty exciting. Like those I would say probably first 6 months or thereabouts, because we were initially in the middle of the island, which is a little bit more, how would I say, probably like suburban living, like in where we are now. It's a little more country and also very surf focused. So like lots of surfing stuff and lots of ocean stuff, people in boats going down the street, people fishing, diving, all kinds of really neat stuff. But it was really exciting when we first got here, and now it's kind of like, okay, this is another place. And being comfortable with that, it's like, okay, we have now integrated successfully into the community. Our kids are in school. They're in extracurricular activities. We have, like a small group of friendlies. I wouldn't call them deep friends, but friendlies around us. And now it's just another place. But being comfortable with that, like, okay, cool. We can actually plant some roots here. It's okay. To actually build that stability. So your outdoor environments, your immediate surroundings, like your neighborhood, where you are geographically is really important. It's important to build in that stability. And even if you are one of these types that is more digital nomad-like, that's great. But you are actually taking that environment with you. So you have to have a different approach than somebody who is geographically planted, in one area. But you can still have that same feeling of stability by choosing to intentionally go to certain locations and then immediately creating that surrounding for yourself where it feels stable. And that's what I have heard from some of my friends who are, a little bit more on that side of the spectrum, where they do live a lot of different places, but everywhere they go, they're creating home and bringing home with them in their unique ways. So there are ways to kind of get around that if you are more of a traveler and you are not staying in one location. Another way that we can be boring or be stable would be mental health. So mental health, I have talked a little bit about it on the podcast, but not a ton. But my partner, I think I've mentioned rapid cycling bipolar disorder 1, and that does affect decision making over time. Because as the person that is, supporting my partner, sometimes it can get really tricky because you are either pulled into, the swings, the mania or the depression, and that can affect your mood in a lot of places. So for me, it's really about being supportive and trying to maintain that stable place. So things that I do in my business and in my life, like if I'm going up and down, like when I was doing the quarterly launches, I was realizing, like in my business, I'm like, okay, I'm having these big swings. It almost felt like a little bit like bipolar. It's like, okay, I have this big mania, this big push, super exciting. And then right afterwards, you're so exhausted, your body collapses. And it's like, oh, kind of feels very similar. Interesting. And I realized that wasn't healthy for my relationship, first of all, because I was not a great partner. And then also it wasn't helpful, with my partner watching me go through that. It could also trigger, like a swing, or it would put an extra amount of pressure that would just kind of pull him out of that, very stable place. So really taking into consideration what to do if you do have mental health challenges in your family, in your immediate surroundings, because even if it's not you, if you're not experiencing it firsthand, you are still a part of the process and you are still going to be affected by what's going on around you. So really taking that into consideration. And I realized, straight up, I'm being honest here. I realized like there are certain aspects of my business that I just realize I cannot pursue because it takes too much of a toll on my personal life and just being a great partner and actually having a little bit of bandwidth when those swings happen. Like if I'm doing a big quarterly launch, and getting excited and doing these webinars, I'm going to be very absent from the rest of my family life, not there so much for my kids and my partner. And I just have not found a way that was feasible for me to do that without really taking a hit on the personal front. So if that's you, that's okay. Like realize that all of us have different challenges. All of us have different backgrounds. I know people who have, physical illness in their family and they're like a caretaker for a child or for a partner or for a family member. And because of that, because they are dedicating themselves in that way and they are available to that other human or humans, individual, they have taken a little bit more of a less proactive approach with their career. And that's okay. Like you have to realize what is important to you and where your values are. And sometimes it's very difficult because you can watch a career or, a career or your colleague, somebody doing something amazing. You're like, that's great. Don't have the bandwidth right now. I'm sitting at the bedside of, my partner that is, going through an episode that needs my support right now. And that's okay. I think it's really understanding what we are meant to do. And I think that's also been powerful and something I've been thinking a lot about. Why am I here? Why am I in this part of my life, in this season of my life with the people I'm surrounded by, the family that I love. What is my part to play in this? It's not just to make a bunch of money and become famous or, follow the typical success path that, Western society tells us is what we're supposed to do. Oh yeah, both of you are going to be like super successful in the business world, make all this money, invest in real estate, leave this legacy for your kids. Like, okay, that's great. No, if that's your path, that's your path. But for some of us, that is not our path. And we have to come to peace with that. And some of that is getting comfortable with the boring, with maintaining stability over prioritizing, like pushing, driving into a place that is not sustainable for us that could actually have very serious repercussions. So something, I know we don't talk a ton about it on the podcast, but it is something that is very close to my heart. And if you are struggling with this or you're supporting someone that's struggling with this, you can always reach out to me. Always happy to talk about this stuff and share ideas. It is something I'm very passionate about. And yes, like I said, close to my heart. And also, family, kids. Like if you have kids, I have kids right now. I have a 6-year-old boy and an 8-year-old daughter, and just really maintaining stability for them. And that's something that I've had to learn over time because I have not been the most stable person. Like I'm not the most boring person. I've done a lot of interesting things. I've run a lot of experiments, and that's kind of how I've lived my life, which is good. I think running experiments is important, but like I said, we got to counterbalance that with the stability and not just jumping from one exciting thing to another exciting thing. There's that place where you have like a breather in between, or where you have to actually take a pause and stop, running tons of experiments all at the same time, where you need to say, okay, what is important to me right now? Do I need to pause or slow down? And we've had to do that this week. I mean, our 6-year-old addiction to electronic devices has been very challenging. So we've been going through a digital detox with him, just removing the tablet. It was becoming a problem, removing the TV because that was becoming an issue too, and just limiting that, but really the tablet. And for those of you with kids and tablets, iPads, phones, all of that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it has just gotten to a point where we're like, okay, we've got to do something about it. We've got to make a change. And so that is actually, disrupting, very disruptive, in the short term. But knowing that long term, that's going to provide much more stability. We can set better boundaries, by resetting. If we do decide to reintroduce the tablet, it's like, okay, we'll have a better sense of what is appropriate, what is not, and better boundaries versus just having a free-for-all with tablets and electronic devices in our household. So that has been something where it's like, yeah, we're roller coastering right now, but it is going to come to a point where it does feel much more stable and where our kids can be healthier and happier long term. So just kind of keeping all of this in mind as you are looking at your life, as you're going through things, whether you're in a place where it feels a little bit boring, or whether you are in that roller coaster place like, Mindy, I wish I was in a boring place right now. I just can't wait to get to that point. Realizing that there's pros and cons in each place, and realizing that it's important to have those roller coaster moments. We're all going to go through them, whether we want to or not. Sometimes they're intentional, sometimes they are not, but really shooting for that stability, for embracing the boring. And really, like, it's kind of coming to that place when I think about meditation and we talk about monkey mind, and monkey mind, where your brain's kind of going like, it feels like a monkey's jumping around in your head, versus being able to just kind of sit there calmly and just be in the moment. And sometimes we do need to jump around like a monkey. We got things to do, places to go, people to see. And sometimes we need to sit calmly and just be there and be present. And I think there's this balance where we have to stop chasing that next adrenaline rush and realize where we need to maintain stability in our life when possible, in our work, in our relationships. So when you can get comfortable in the day-to-day, you can actually build a stronger foundation. So when you build that stability, and especially if you get a period of time where you get this opportunity to build stability, you are building a foundation. I see it as like a foundation on a house where it's like, okay, great. We aren't just pulling materials together. We're not trying to pick our location. Like, we are actually building this freaking house. And that stability, those times of stability, are helping you to strengthen that foundation and give it time, rather than jumping to conclusions too quickly or shaking things up, or, just kind of running around like we would say, a chicken with their head cut off. That's just not a beautiful image, though. This is not about apathy. Rather, it's about knowing what works for you and what does not work. So do not take this as like, oh, well, Mindy said I don't have to care about anything anymore. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about prioritizing stability, because to me, it's a value, and I've actually added it to like my character traits and the things that I value is stability, because when it's not there, oh, you know it, and things can just feel all topsy-turvy and crazy. So it is something that I truly do value, and a lot of people don't know that, because they're like, well, Mindy, you've done all these really exciting things. You have this exciting business. And I'm like, yeah, but if you actually looked at my everyday life, it's really boring. I do the same thing like every day. It may be a little bit different on the weekends, but on the weekdays, it's the same thing. And yes, I live in Hawaii, but I'm not on vacation. It's like, it is just another place. And yes, surfing is a part of my flow, but that's like what going to the gym is for a lot of other people. Like, yeah, it's exciting when you're first learning, but after a certain period of time, it's just part of your exercise routine. And yes, I enjoy it, but it is not like this roller coaster ride, I should say. Unless it's a really big swell and you're freaking scared paddling out. In that case, it is a roller coaster ride. So too many entrepreneurs I know, kind of getting back to a little bit of the work stuff, are trying to scale to the moon with their businesses when they also truly don't want that responsibility of managing a big team or delegating everything, the whole know what you want and go with that. And so if you feel like you've been forcing yourself, you're like, yeah, Mindy, I think I've been pushing myself a little too far in a direction that I didn't even want to go. Maybe if I can get back to that stable place, there were certain aspects of my business that I did like. And when I tried to shake it up, because we get told, we get sold, let's just be honest here, these ideas from other entrepreneurs who are making it big in the space, whom we respect and admire, which is great. I think that's fine. Some people are meant to do that. Some of us are not. And they tell us things like, you've got to do something different. If you want different results, buy my program. It's like these underlying tones. You're just like, yeah, that's a sales pitch. But it goes into our psyche, and we feel like we're doing something wrong if we're not trying hard enough. If we are, settling in our businesses for that predictable stream of revenue when we should actually be trying to scale it and build our teams and do more good in the world. Some of us are just not meant to do that. And if you are not called to that, then that's okay. You can keep your business at whatever size you want. If you want it to be a side hustle and not your main gig, that's fine too. Keep your job. I've seen so many people that get into entrepreneurialism and they leave a job. They're like, I left my job. I'm going to make it big. And they spend like 18 months hustling. They are working hard and it is not working. And by the end of that, they've spent a bunch of resources and they realize they actually did like having that stable job and maybe just wanted to do some things on the side. So your business and identifying yourself with your career is really dangerous. Your career is not who you are as a human. This is something that I continue to struggle with over time because I often self-identify with what I do professionally, and it feels like it's never good enough sometimes. You can actually check out the podcast episode that I did on that where it's called It's Never Good Enough. So if you are there, if you're struggling, if you're like, Mindy, you know what? This is really resonating with me today. It's okay for things to be stable. It's okay for things to be boring. It's okay to have a 9-to-5 job if that brings in the money and I know I'm good and then maybe I can do exciting things out of that. Go with it. Go with it. All right. This is what this podcast is about. It's about doing life your way. It's about not looking at what other people are doing and just trying to copycat them because you feel pressure, whether it's internal or external pressure. It's about doing what resonates with you. And then back to the topic of mental illness and mental well-being and physical illness. If you do have anyone in your immediate family who suffers from something like that and you are supporting in any way, it doesn't have to be full-time. You don't have to be married to them. They don't have to be your kid or your parent. But if you are supporting as a caretaker in any capacity, maintaining your own stability is key to being able to keep your own sense of identity and also help the people you care about. So it is, we've heard it before, but the whole putting yourself first. Some days, it is like this in our house where it's one of those days, I know it. I can sense it. I'm like, all right, it's feeling uncomfortable. I know we're in a swing right now. But you know what? I lay my boundaries, and for me, surfing every day, as long as it's safe, is what I do. So even if things are crazy in the house, even if I feel like I'm getting the death stare or, people are not in their normal happy place, I still go surfing and I say, okay, I'm going to go surf now. I'll be back. I'll be about an hour. I'll be back. And I take that time for myself to reset. And that is key. And it's hard. It's hard walking out that door when I know things are not in the best place and where I feel guilty that I'm leaving, and I actually should feel bad. I should feel, like in my mind, I'm like, I feel so much guilt. But doing that for myself has helped me keep my own sense of identity, first of all, because I love to surf. It keeps me happy. It's meditative. I'm being in nature. I'm getting sunshine. I get all the things, right? Get my exercise in. So even if I don't do any other type of exercise, I'm getting in some outdoor activity. And it also, I come back from that surfing session feeling so much more refreshed and able to give. And to me, that is critical because I feel like a lot of times my giving stores are just very depleted. Like I give a lot in my business. I give a lot to my family. I feel like a lot of times I feel just stretched very thin, but that's surfing. Just knowing what it is for you. It doesn't have to be surfing, obviously, but knowing what it is for you that fills you up. Maybe it's going to the coffee house with a friend. Maybe it's calling up your best friend or just having a Zoom chat like, hey, can you talk for a few minutes? Something like that. Sometimes I just write my mom. Like, I love my mom. She's fantastic. I will write her an email. I'll spend like 20 minutes writing her an email, blah, Mom, thank you so much for listening. And she listens to me, and so I think it's figuring out what those things are for you that help you to maintain your sense of stability. Also getting professional help. Like throughout the years, I have definitely seen a number of therapists, who have helped me kind of work through issues as they've arisen. I'm not seeing one right at the moment, but I'm considering it because sometimes just having that professional person there for you that is not in any way tied to the situation just gives you that space to breathe and gives you that support. There are also a great number of support groups. I know with mental health and mental wellness, NAMI, N-A-M-I, just Google NAMI, they have some great support groups. And I'm on like the mailing list for the support for caregivers group. And they meet, I think like once or twice a month. So there are so many resources out there if you just open your eyes. And if you are caring for anyone in that way, even if you think, Mindy, it's not that big a deal. It is if it's something, especially over time, if it's a long period of time, make sure that you dial that in because otherwise you're going to have your own breakdown and it's not good for anyone, so just take care of yourself. I think that's my takeaway. Like enjoy the boring. It's okay. And don't feel like you have to shake it up. And this is something like a little metaphor along this line. We talked a little bit about surfing, but understanding your level as a surfer is really important. Okay. I consider myself an avid surfer. So an avid surfer, not a good surfer, an avid surfer. So I'm not trying to make it to the pro level. I'm not trying to compete in any way, shape, or form. I'm not great at longboarding. I'm not great at shortboarding. I'm not great at any of these things. Big waves, definitely not. So what I stopped doing was putting my pressure on myself to become really good. Like I really like shortboarding. It's like I would love to be able to do like surf a wave top to bottom and do like sick maneuvers and throw spray and do a layback. I don't know what it is about a layback, but that's what I want to do. So right now, what I focus on is every time I go surfing, I don't beat myself up because I can't do all of those maneuvers. It's really about surfing the section that is right in front of me. And what I know right at the moment, I don't have the skills of a great surfer, a kid who's been surfing since they were 5. I learned in my 30s, so I'm not going to be that great. But you know what? I can surf the section in front of me based on what I know and have a heck ton of fun versus looking down the line and thinking, oh, I should be doing this. I should be doing this. I should be taking off here. I should be taking off at the peak. Those guys can surf out back and I'm on the inside. Like living it one wave at a time. It's just like life. We live one day at a time, especially in those moments when we are trying to increase stability, when we are trying to maintain that. So stop looking so far in the future and freaking out because you're not on the path. Sometimes it's like, okay, what's right in front of me? What do I need to do today? Like in this moment. I mean, we can even take it into this minute, this next 10 minutes, this next hour. What can I do now to increase that stability in my life? And look at that instead of trying to look so far ahead that you lose sight of what's right in front of you. So where in your life have you noticed that boring can be a good thing? Like after we talked about this, you're like, Mindy, you know what? There's this one area of my life that's really boring, but you know what? Now I don't feel so bad about it. I don't have to shake things up in that way. So are you currently undervaluing the power of stability in your life? That one was a big one for me. And it's something I've been thinking about, like I've talked about today, because stability is everything. I love feeling stable. I like predictability. Like, this is very core to my nature. And some of you may say, Mindy, that's definitely not my personality type. That's fine. But everyone needs some level of stability in their life to be successful as a human. So whatever that level is for you, you may not need as much as I do, but whatever your level of stability that helps you function best, know what that is and know what you can do to prioritize. Like, what areas do you need to be a little bit more boring versus shaking things up? Because when you're a little more boring in certain areas, that frees you up. That means in other areas, you're going to have a lot more energy to put towards things because you're keeping it stable in one and freeing up energy in the other. I'm curious to hear your take, as always, so DM me on Instagram to share your take on the whole boring is good and maintaining stability, mental health and wellness, all good stuff. I'm also on TikTok. Just look up @Mango Effect Podcast. If you send me a message there, my daughter Michaela will see it before I do, but she loves it. So feel free to send her messages there. She will ping me and let me know and I will respond. So let's encourage and inspire each other this week and maybe think about how we can make our lives a little bit more boring. So if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the Mango Effect Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And if you love it, I'd be thrilled, of course, if you wanted to write a 5-star review for the show. We are still a new show. I can't believe it that we're almost 6 months into the making. So any reviews and subscribes we get will definitely help us as we grow over time. Have a beautiful rest of your day. I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye for now.